Welcome to Careers in Discovery, your window into the world of biotech leaders. On each episode, we interview the industry's leading executives to understand how they built their careers, what they've learned along the way, and the advice they'd give to their younger selves. We're back on Careers in Discovery with Martijn Van De Bunt, Chief Scientific Officer at Cytoki Pharma, a biotech in Denmark working on therapies for obesity, diabetes, and IBD. Martijn discussed the most important moments in his career, from a PhD that sparked his passion for impactful science to the biggest pharma company in Europe and ultimately to Cytoki. He talked about the importance of adaptability, the nuances of transitioning between academia and industry, and the roles that networks and teamwork have played in achieving success.
Welcome back to Careers in Discovery. This week I'm joined by Martijn Van De Bunt, CSO from Cytoki Pharma. Welcome, Martijn.
Thank you, Emma. And it's a pleasure to be here on the podcast today.
I can't wait to get started. I suppose the place to start is to talk a little bit about you and the work Cytoki Pharma are doing at the moment.
Yes, so I'm the Chief Scientific Officer at Cytoki, as you already mentioned. And at Cytoki, we're developing IL-22-based medicine for people living with obesity, type 2 diabetes, and also inflammatory bowel disease. And as a small biotech based in Denmark, what we're really doing is working in a so-called virtual manner. So we're really a small team of people that have been working together now for the past 3.5 years, where it's been very exciting to take our lead program from what it was back in the day, back in 2021. We just had a molecule and a dream that we could get this to patients and help them. And what we've done and worked very hard now to be in our phase 2 studies, where we're really trying to prove now that this medicine our new IL-22 based medicine will make a difference for people living with obesity and diabetes. So it's an exciting place to be and an exciting journey to be on.
Yes, absolutely. You talked a little bit there about working in a virtual environment. Does that mean you are spread globally, the team?
So the team itself the core team is very small and mostly based in Denmark. But because you can't develop a drug with just a handful of people, that's where the global footprint comes in. So we have the privilege of working with a lot of different consultants and contract research organizations who are really on top of what they're doing. And then we work with them to make it possible to take this drug into clinic. So you work with a lot of different cultures, a lot of different people that we then orchestrate from this small team that has been working together for the past 3.5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose before we get into your career history, I'd like to understand a little bit about how you chose your career in science, particularly within drug discovery.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. And I think also one of the things that perhaps is interesting to think about when talking about careers in general, because to be honest, I never really considered a career in drug discovery when I started at the start of my career. Because originally I did do medicine, studied medicine in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and my whole intent was to do something with medicine and research, because I always liked the curiosity part of the discovery. So also during my studies, I did research in a lab while time allowed during what I was doing. So I knew I wanted to do that, and therefore I thought I wanted to be sort of an academic clinician, where you work in a large university hospital and you see your patients, and on the side you have time to pursue research. And that was really the career I set out on. And then life happens, and then you find yourself where you find today. So it's sort of the parts that were there from the beginning, that wanting to really help a lot of people, and the curiosity of science, they definitely always were there. But that this would lead to the career that it has led to, I think that is the exciting part of seeing how it then actually goes in practice.
Yeah. And that's interesting because that's not a story that that's new to me. That people, they do their medicine degrees and they are perhaps slightly more interested in the research side, so they presume it's the academic career. I think we do enough to highlight the careers in industry for those that are studying at university.
That's a good question. I think on the one hand, of course, yes, because everyone knows about it. So once one knows about it, there is awareness. I think maybe what sometimes could be highlighted more is that a career is a sort of a steps of choices, and not one choice that you make at the beginning. And I think this, when you start out, when you just come out of university, is something you probably don't appreciate. That yes, you have completed your medicine degree in my case, and yes, most people will indeed become doctors, and that's indeed the intent. But most people is not all people, and a lot of the people will then still decide to take choices elsewhere, and then it's broad, and you can use your skills in very different way than that you originally had thought about.
Yeah, absolutely, that makes sense. So once you'd studied your medical degree, you then went on and you did your PhD.
That's right. So I thought, well, then to do academic medicine, you need a PhD to get a position in the Netherlands at least. So then I thought, well, okay, I want a challenge, and I found that challenge. I was very lucky to get a PhD studentship in Oxford in the UK, where I went to do my PhD in genetics and genomics of type 2 diabetes specifically. And that was very exciting and a very like a motivating environment to be in. And I think that's how then the next steps came about, because your eyes open a bit to what you were saying about, okay, at university, do we do enough? Yes and no. Like I knew that there was a PhD, I knew there was research, but you don't really appreciate the fullness of what this comes with. So when I then got to the end of my PhD, I had really sort of seen the light, in the sense that yes, I could still go back to medicine, but I was just no longer thinking that was the way I was going, because I really liked this idea that rather than one patient at a time, you could really help a lot of patients at once if we made the breakthrough discoveries that we were trying to do. And I think that's also what then has sort of led through to steps that came after, because I then spent nearly 10 years at the University of Oxford, and it was a great time, and I learned a lot of things. But at the end of it, I did feel now I was getting a bit too far away again from these patients that I was initially trying to help. It became very sort of conceptual, and that's then what drove the decision to go into drug discovery, because there it is a lot closer to what I set out to do again. So it is a series of steps where you learn things along the way that then dictates, okay, I feel I've learned this and I really enjoy it, but something's missing. How can I find this something that's missing? Hence, I then moved into drug discovery.
Yeah, that's a fantastic part, and it's a nice visual of the stepping stones that you've taken to collect the different experiences.
Yeah, and I think on the whole, maybe I'm sure we'll talk about this a bit later, but just thinking that your career is a stepwise process and not something that you can say, okay, today, start of career, I'm going to be this, and off you go, and you either make it or you don't. It's very far away from that, even though at the beginning it might feel a lot more like, okay, I need to have this goal, I need to have this one aspiration, and there is only one way, and it's pre-described, and I just need to follow the rest.
Yeah, it's too black and white.
Yeah.
Talk me through your move into industry. How did that differ to your time in academia when you made that move?
Yes. So after Oxford and England, I moved to Novo Nordisk in Denmark, and I think it in many ways was a very smooth transition, and it was still metabolic disease, still diabetes and obesity. So I knew the field. Yes, the context is different, but I knew what to do. And then you have to learn how actually a large organization works, because I think there's science and there are science, and every aspect of the science, be that the academic science, the industry science, or the biotech science, they all have a very common feature, right? You're trying to do drug discovery, or you're trying to do discovery, so that bit you know you're an expert at, but how to actually communicate what you've done, and how to understand why to do something, how to do something, who to engage at what time. I think there you have the contexts that matter a lot, and that's what you of course have to learn when you go from academia to industry. Okay, decisions are made in a different way, and as a very small but I think quite exemplary thing always in academia, everything gets written down in a lengthy Word document, which is an excellent way to convey a lot of information. But that if you in an industry setting write a large document, it's more to send off to people that are used to this. Maybe one calls it a white paper, maybe, but it's not the sort of the way in which the companies actually like read the information. They are more thinking about PowerPoints and putting them into slides. And so you need to change how you think about it and frame the same story that you're trying to frame, but now in the right context.
That's really great practical advice, actually, to visualize the differences between academia and industry, and definitely those communication elements are huge differences.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, from a culture perspective, did you see big differences within the culture?
I mean, within Europe, of course, cultural differences are smaller to some degree than they are on a worldwide scale. But of course, you see many. There's the cultural reference that you don't have. So there's the jokes that you might not get, or that you don't understand why certain translations into English have come about that are very logical when you're, say, a native Danish speaker or a native Dutch speaker if it's in the Netherlands, but not so much when you're not. Communication styles are different, decision ways are different. They're always different, and I think in a large company, it starts to get slightly more of an international context, of course, because, for example, part of my team was based out of Beijing in China, and there was a very different Chinese culture that came in. So you automatically have to find a more cosmopolitan style that is common to a lot of large organizations. But I think you always have to be cognizant of the fact that they are inexistent, and you have to be very careful. Specifically, I always think with ones where you share the language. Because I think the one that's always the most classically underappreciated and underestimated is the cultural differences between people based in the US and people based in the UK, which I think might be even a larger cultural difference than, say, someone in Denmark and someone in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. So during your time with Novo Nordisk, you spent a lot of time working within bioinformatics on the data side. And I noticed you started then in around 2017. And I was really interested to find out from your opinion how things have changed a lot since 2017, the way we collect data, the way we utilize data. Would you mind talking to me a little bit about your opinions and views in that area?
Yes, and I think the nice thing with something like bioinformatics is that it's a good example of how everything around us also changes in that the data is being used and seen as usable, and of course by using it you then learn even more about what it's actually best for. So I think one of the things that was changing a lot and has changed a lot is sort of expectations. So there is what you do, so the data that's available, and the sort of techniques that you apply to that to get your answers, and those grow. And data, of course, grows exponentially. So it's always more and more difficult to actually get the grain of truth out of the data, but then the methods grow along with it. So, it sort of helps you along the way and it gets better and better. But what has really changed, of course, is people's expectations, both on the good and the bad. So I think the good thing is there's a little bit more appreciation of what can be done, and that it sometimes is not as easy or as straightforward as you hope for. But then again, then a new technology comes about, think generative AI right now, and sort of it gets the slate gets wiped clean, and everyone's back to
New shiny thing, yeah.
Finally a silver bullet. And a lot of things get made possible again that never you could only dream of doing before. But the silver bullet, it never is, particularly not in something like drug discovery, because there's so many nuances to it. It's not just finding the right drug target, but you also have to make a drug, and then you have to produce a drug, and then you have to run your clinical trials, and therefore there's a lot of decisions in it that are based on data and based on science, but they need to also take into account things that are definitely not captured in it. So I think there's a lot of practical things more possible now that will have refined a lot of the decision making, giving you a lot more of a picture. But in the end of the day, then still there's some decisions that need to be made.
Yep, that human input is still very vital. Yeah.
Exactly.
So you had a wonderful career at Novo Nordisk. Talk me through your decision making to move to Cytoki.
Yes, and I think that takes me back to these steps, and that you can have a dream or a thought, but you never know what life will actually throw at you. And actually, I was not at all looking to leave Novo Nordisk when I did. I was very happy doing what I did, to be honest. And as you said, things were going well, and it was a very exciting company to be part of. There was a lot of growth happening, and a lot of opportunities opening up with that.
Yeah.
What actually happened was that a former colleague of mine got a large amount of money, a 40 million euro Series A in place to take this idea, this IL-22 molecule that existed but was just on paper there, to clinic. And he wanted to do this with a really small team. And this was something that I found really exciting. And it doesn't come about that often, that you both have the money and people that you like working with to do something, and to really take it in your own hands and take it to somewhere that is meaningful. So it was just that. It was the opportunity that dictated my change. And I haven't looked back since, but it definitely wasn't because I was like, oh, I really need to take this step into biotech. I actually was more like, yeah, but then you're in this resource, like this cash-strapped environment
Being
where
pulled.
you need to do big things, right? So that was actually how it then came about.
Yeah, that perfect storm. Great scientific concept, having the funding and the relationships to know that you can work well together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think both of them are so important because I think it's often underappreciated, of course, the importance of the team, and the team being both your direct colleagues and the people that you work for, be that your leaders or some other sort of governance body in a biotech setting. Because on paper, your role might be ideal, but if you can't, if nothing moves, if you feel really do not feel part of something, then it's just on paper, and you'll never be able to shine. So in a company, you need a team around you. You need to find the people in different part of the organizations that if something needs to happen, they can make something happen. And in the setting of a biotech, we're really, there's just about 4 individuals in an office most days. So if you don't get along, that's not an environment you probably want to be in that much. So it's super important when you then choose where to go, that you actually match with the people that you're going to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And often, even at senior levels, we're talking to people about areas where they can provide their expertise and their knowledge, but what they can also gain and what they can learn from the people that they'll be working with, because that continuous learning is so important, even when you've got years of experience.
Yes, and I mean, not related to career specifically, but when you sort of think about it, you're going to hire people, and especially in the beginning when it's, say, your first hire, and then probably you're going to weigh technical skills over sort of person. But as you hire more and more people, or you realize that probably potential is what you need to look at and fit with the rest of the people that they need to work with, because you do need to have a working team. And you don't need to have a team of individuals that on their own would be great, but together make for a terrible game.
Yeah, it'd be like bumper cars, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, we're often talking about being deliberate about building those values, about building that culture, even really small stage.
Absolutely. And also, like in the company, we are very deliberate about that. So we several times a year focus, like have 1 or 2 days to specifically focus on that, not because it's only fun, but also because you need to build the understanding of each other, get to core values, so that when times are tough, which in a small biotech you encounter with some regularity, you can fall back on those values and that understanding of each other to then weather the storm, get things together, and move on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really great insight. Thank you, Martin. Suppose it would be a good time to ask, what would be your one piece of advice to people who are early in their careers or completing their PhDs?
Yes, I think there's probably 2 things that I would think about taking your one thing and then probably branching it out a bit. And the one thing, the first thing is, as I said before, you can't really plan your career. It's sort of, you can make steps that work towards the next step of your career. So be intentional in that. Be intentional in what you can control. That's if you really dream to go into industry in your academia, or you want to go into biotech, there are things that you can do, and you then need to stick to it. But don't sort of set out, oh, I want to be the CEO of a large company, because how do you take the steps towards that? And with that also comes the fact that it's not linear. I think the sort of the most successful careers definitely are not a progression straight up the ladder. of any sort of career track, you need to be exposed to that difference in viewpoints, cultures, parts of organizations with different goals. And that then makes you really propel onwards. And whereas if you just try to take it step after step after step, you probably at some point get lost in the system.
Yeah, or there becomes a ceiling of it because you haven't collected enough tools along the journey.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I can see that. Go on then, and let me have your cheeky second piece of advice.
And the cheeky second is people. Like, your career is your career, but it becomes a career with people and through people. So you should remember the power of network and the power of sort of conviction. Because if you're right, I'd say that you're a scientist and you think it's about being correct, being right. I have found the best drug target, which is a great step, and contact me, feel free.
Yeah.
But, it's more that, okay, but someone else has to see this, right? Because you're sitting in your office, be that an open office or a small office, and no one has heard of it or thought about it and seen how it fits in. So you need to put it into its context. And that means you need other people to be your ambassador of your idea and you as a person, because otherwise you're just someone that thinks themselves they're right.
Yeah.
And that can be done through the network that you build up, which also then builds up your name recognition and the fact that you can call someone when you think you want this different step. Okay, it's always easier if you know someone there, or someone can put a word for you in with the person who's actually looking to hire. So I think, do it together. Don't just think of yourself as the single agent that is going to be your career.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. Would you have any sort of practical advice for people who are looking to network and the types of things they should be doing?
Yeah, I think there's sort of the aspect that you need to be intentional and persistent at it. And it needs to fit with who you are as a person. So, I mean, some of us are extroverts, some of us are introverts.
Yeah.
Or, if you're extrovert, it's easier to just talk to a lot of people. But it might happen without less of a sort of intent about it. Whereas if you're introvert, then in general, you can't spend your energy more wisely. Yes, you probably don't want to talk to 100 people, but you can pick who you speak to and make sure that then these interactions matter, because without it, it just becomes harder. And I think the other aspect to consider is that asking is always free. So if you want to just hear how it's going, that's often a great entry into finding a job. Because you're just curious, right? And they might not have a job. It doesn't need to be, but now you're talking. Now you are a face for someone, and they might in tomorrow or in 2 months have a role that they're looking to hire, and they think like, oh, I had this really nice conversation with this person at this random location. Oh, they might be a good candidate for them. I'll ask them to apply. And the same goes with when it's more about understanding what to do, right? You might not know someone that works in industry or biotech, but reaching out through LinkedIn or through whatever easy access. Lots of people will not respond, but many more than you do. Even though you have very little in common, if you come with the right question, they'll be like, yeah, sure, I'll spend 50 minutes, spend 30 minutes talking to them, and that never hurts.
And I think it's important to remember that everyone's been where they are. There was always a point where they were looking for that first job. There's always a point where they were new to industry, and people
absolutely
do want to help each other. It's intrinsic in us, isn't it?
Yeah, and that first step is always the hardest. because at that point in time, you just come with the least sort of knowledge, skills, familiarity. You're just one of often hundreds of applicants sometimes. So that's where you really have to be persistent and really be reaching out, because these days, talking to what to do with data, a lot of the times, if your CV doesn't contain the sort of the key elements, it will be sifted out automatically before any human would see it. Yeah. So just knowing that you're applying, if you've spoken to someone, already makes it more likely that they might ask, oh, I spoke to this person, I haven't seen them, has it been filtered out? So that helps. And then when you get through, of course, there's still 100 left, or even if it's 60 left, that's a lot of CVs, right? And it's a lot of, you're probably going to invite 5, maybe 10 people for the first sort of quick conversation. So think of that. You need to make sure that there's some recognition in there, because you have to assume that everyone's talented.
Yeah, absolutely. And get your personality to shine through when you're, because at the early level, the skill sets will look very similar.
Exactly.
So to make yourself a little bit different, two wonderful pieces of advice.
Yeah, and I think that bit, that once you're through to interview, then personality shines through, right? But the hardest thing is the thing where nothing really shines through, when you're just a CV. Because if you try to make your personality shine too much on the CV, I mean,
looks a bit wowy.
Not my preference. Like, you just need to sort of figure out whether it broadly works.
Yeah. No, great advice. Thank you very much, Martin. Both to sort of finish off our conversation, what's next? What's next for you in terms of your learning? What's next for Cytoki in the next, I suppose, readout for clinical phase 2?
No, I think that is sort of what's next for me and Cytoki. This very exciting time. So we're running now our phase 2, our clinical proof of concept study. So when that reads out in the early parts of 2026, I mean, that's crunch time. Of course, we are a small company, and it's very important that it is of course a good result. But we cannot foresee it. We just have to keep our fingers crossed until we finally have the data to prove that we're on the right track. So that's very exciting. Also, it's exciting because you've taken it from the beginning, because there weren't 100 individuals around that knew everything about every step. You just had to bring in the right people and move forward, have your eyes on the target of where it was going to go.
It must be a real mix of being nervous and being very exciting all at the same time.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. Every time you get more data, even though it's like no data at all, you're like, oh, what does this mean? And then you go like, oh, great, and the next day you're like, oh, terrible, and then back. So it's just human emotions, and it makes it fun.
How do you balance preparing for a positive readout and the next step, whilst not investing too much just in case? It must be a hard balance.
Oh, that is a very hard balance. I think it's like anything that you really want, right? You just you need to really want it, because otherwise you lose your energy. And then just keep a certain, like every month set aside one day to just think about it very logically, rationally, boring. So. And that way you can keep yourself level and then enjoy the ups and downs as they come, and probably the ups a bit more than the downs. And then in practice, the other thing that you of course do is make good plans. So make for the different scenarios, make the right plan so that you have backup options when it comes to what to do as a company, just like with your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your story. It was a real pleasure to have you.
Thank you. And it was great being here. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe and share it with someone else you think will benefit. And for more podcasts, videos, blogs, and insights, come follow me, Tom Froggatt, on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Medium, or TikTok. See you next time.